Hi there. In this video, I will teach you how to set up Arch Linux in VirtualBox environment, which I'll be using for this training session on Introduction to Linux Kernel Internals and Development. So this particular video will help you in setting up your environment, which will be in sync with the similar environment that I will be using for my training course as such. So first of all, to download VirtualBox, you can head over to virtualbox.org. This is the official website where you can download the latest version of VirtualBox and install it from there. You can also manually install Arch Linux by going to archlinux.org website. But what I suggest is that you install VirtualBox by either using a package manager for Linux, or if you're using Windows, you can head over to this website like you can see here. So if you just go to virtualbox.org and you can go to the download link here. If you are using Windows or MacOS on Intel architecture, so if you're using a very old MacBook Pro which runs on Intel chipset, or if you're using Windows, you can follow these links and download them. Some of you might ask, what if I'm using a Mac M1 or M2 laptops, the modern Mac laptops? Unfortunately, I don't have the setup with me, so it's very difficult for me to demonstrate on that hardware. But you could actually try your luck by not with the VirtualBox, but with another software called UTM for Mac. I guess this is a website. If we just go to mac.getutm.app, so in this particular website, you can download a virtualization software for Mac, which runs on M1, M2 kind of hardware. So you can download this and install it on your Mac. It's also available on your Mac App Store. And you need to follow the procedure through this particular tool. It comes with a UI. Through the UI, you can download Arch Linux ISO image and manually install them, right? But in this video, I'll tell you how to use an automated installation, especially if you're going to use VirtualBox for Intel hardware, primarily on Windows or Linux or Mac on Intel hardware as such. So first you download VirtualBox and install it from here. If you're using Linux distributions, it's much more easier to install VirtualBox. All the mainstream Linuxes provide VirtualBox in their packages. So you can go to the package manager, which I will just list it right below here. So if you're using Debian or Ubuntu or Mint Linux or any distribution that uses the Debian package management system, you can use this command. On your terminal, you can run sudo apt install VirtualBox. If you're using any Red Hat based distributions, be it Red Hat Linux, Rocky Linux, Fedora, Oracle Enterprise Linux, and many others, you can use their package manager instead, where you can type sudo dnf install VirtualBox or sudo yum install VirtualBox based on what tool is available for your Linux desktop. If you're using Arch variants, maybe variants of Arch Linux like Arch or Manjaro or EndeavorOS or Gerdau Linux, you can use Pacman, which is the official package manager for Arch Linux. You can use Pacman -S VirtualBox. So these are the package names available. It's pretty straightforward. So because I'm using an Ubuntu desktop for this particular video streaming, so I could actually use the Ubuntu package manager by running this command sudo apt install VirtualBox. But as you can see, that VirtualBox is already installed on my machine. So it just shows that VirtualBox is already the newest, as you can see here. Now, once you install VirtualBox, you should be able to launch the desktop, icon, which will show up in your desktop menus. So you can launch VirtualBox, which you will see like this. And you can manually set up a VM with Arch Linux on it. But my intent in this video, is to automate this entire flow using a script. So when you install VirtualBox on your computer, you will have a tool called VBox Manage. So this tool is available on the system path on Linux environments. On macOS and Windows, however, you need to know where VirtualBox is installed and use that path accordingly. Maybe on Windows, it is c:/program file / Oracle / VirtualBox / VBox Manage. It will go on to that particular path. Mac will also have a similar path. I have a helper script which I will show you. I'll walk you through the script very quickly so you can find out the paths, but you can run that script to automate it. So this VBox Manage must be on path for my script to work. And Talking about my script, I will tell you how to get this script. I have this on my GitHub repository. You can download from this link. So this is a GitHub URL where you can go to github.com/proc/linux kernel intro. So this is the official GitHub URL for this automation scripts that I have hosted. But if you want to get the complete download in a zip file, you can just download this link. Oh yeah, this link looks long, but I'll tell you how to reach out there. So if you go to this particular link, that is github.com/proc/linux kernel intro. I guess I should have opened it in my browser. Okay, I will just, I have a link which I added in my bookmark. Yeah. You'll find this GitHub URL here, /proc/linux kernel intro. So this particular link provides the helper scripts under setup folder for now. It's easy to just download the zip file by clicking on code and selecting download zip right here. This will download the zip file. It's already downloaded in my machine. As you can see here, I can just overwrite it. It's a very small set of scripts. Once the script is downloaded, you can unzip this in your terminal. So you can open up your Mac terminal, or if you're using Windows, you can use your Windows PowerShell terminal, or you can also use your Linux terminal. And within this terminal, you can just unzip this file by using unzip downloads /linux kernel intro main.zip. This file is already being unzipped from my machine, but anyways, I will go ahead and select all. Yeah. Once you unzip this, you'll have a folder called Linux kernel intro main. It creates that name apparently, including the branch name. Within this folder, you'll find a folder called setup, which is where you'll have the setup scripts. And here you'll find a couple of shell scripts here. All of these are bash scripts, and there's also one PowerShell script. So if you're a Windows user, the only script that you need to be concerned with is this VirtualBox arch-linux-setup.ps1. You can run this in your PowerShell. I guess you might need to enable running, unsigned scripts in your Windows computer. So I'm not currently using Windows, so obviously I cannot demonstrate that, but I guess you can figure that out. And if you're using Linux or MacOS terminal, you could run this shell script, which is VirtualBox arch-linux-setup.sh. And this particular shell script that you see here, you can customize the shell script to your liking. There are certain default settings I've made. It's going to create a folder called Linux Kernel Development /VirtualBox in your home directory, which is where the Linux images would be stored, the ISO image, and also the virtual machine image, the hard disk images could be stored there. And you can see the path to the ISO image is also represented here. You can customize all these to suit your requirement or your machine configuration. You can also set up how much memory you want to use, how many CPUs you want to use. All these are customizable entries which are neatly commented to your liking. If you don't want to run this script, if you find yourself a little skeptical running scripts, you can look up the commands right here and run those commands manually if you choose to run it on your computer. You can also see that it's using one of these redirected URL. The script for that is also available in the GitHub repository for you to review it. Basically, this will scrape archlinux.org website and go to the downloads folder and find out the link to the latest ISO image and redirect it to the URL. Like that's what this does. It's a PHP script. You can have a look into it by looking up the GitHub URL. There's also one more script of interest, is this particular script that will be automatically fed to the Arch Linux installer. To automate the entire installation of Arch Linux on your VirtualBox environment, this script will be run by sending them as scan code while Arch Linux ISO image is booting up. And this installer script will take care of setting up the partitions, formatting the partition, installing all the relevant packages from Arch Linux repository, and also setting up the root shell profile. So you can review the scripts if you find yourself a little skeptical in the scripts, and look them up, and you can also use them as cues for running these commands manually if you want to, right? So this is the script that you want to run. The same script is also available for PowerShell. You can also look it up. It's almost similar, but uses the PowerShell syntax. And a honest disclaimer is that I'm not a PowerShell user, so I sort of hacked this script around quickly. But you can customize it accordingly. And if you find any bugs or any improvisations, you can also suggest patches. I will add them in the Git repository. All right. It has a very similar feel using PowerShell syntax. And both of these will create a new virtual machine in VirtualBox, setting up all the default settings for RAM and hard disk and all those features. And after that, it'll kickstart the installer after bootstrapping the ISO image by feeding the keyboard scan code. The actual install that will automate installation of Arch Linux is in this particular script, which is arch linux underscore vbox underscore autoinstall.sh. Though I made this script available on my GitHub repository, the script is actually being launched from my personal domain. I will be modifying it much later when I find time, but it's the same script, right? If you're skeptical about it, you can always download the script manually either from a domain to review it's got the same contents, and you can run these commands manually when you bootstrap through the ISO image in VirtualBox virtual machine. So this takes care of creating partition, formatting the partition, mounting the newly created partition onto a mount point at /mnt. Using the reflector, it tries to find out the fastest mirror list from your location based on your geography and your internet connectivity. And these are the packages that will be installed. By default, when you install Arch Linux, more often you will install only the base package and maybe just a few packages for like Linux and so on. But as we are going to be developing for the kernel, doing kernel development, I have added a couple of tools that you might find it useful for both writing code for the kernel and also for debugging and instrumentation. Things like BPF trace, perf, tracecmd, all these are installed. If you want, you can customize the script and run them manually also, right? So, and there's also a stage 2 script that will take care of creating the default configuration for the bootloader and also setting up the time zone and so on. You can look it up. And the root's password is also set right here. Of course, the virtual machine that we are creating is not going to be very secure. It's a playground where you can play around with things, right? So you will log in as root user and the password will be welcome. Anyways, without any further ado, we'll just run this script now. And when the script is running, I will explain some more features in relation to them. So these are the links for you to download. I'll be sharing these links in the courseware for you to look up and use readily. And let me just run this script here. Just one. Yeah. So I'm just going to run vbox underscore arch linux underscore setup.sh. If you're a PowerShell user, just run the .ps1. Okay, the extension ps1 that will take care of creating the virtual machine for you. So running this will automate the entire process of downloading the ISO image for Arch Linux, creating the virtual machine, and bootstrapping the VM, which went into another screen of mine. Here it is. Yeah, it's feeding the script, and you can see that Arch Linux ISO is booted with the script. Yeah, that'll give you a lot of noise like these auto capture keyboard and mouse that you see on the sidebar and VirtualBox over here. You can close it. By the way, if you accidentally click on the mouse or the keyboard in this window, your mouse cursor might vanish. And if that happens, you might want to use the VirtualBox hotkey. I guess on the Mac computer is the right command switch. And if you're using a Linux or if you're using a Windows computer, I think you might want to use the right control key. This will detach the mouse and the mouse just comes out. So if your mouse gets stuck, just find out what is the hotkey. The hotkey would be represented in here in one of these key bindings. I guess it's, was it here? It should be in the input keyboard, yes. Could show up in one of these menu entries anyways, but it is the right control key on my machine. Some machines will be the command key if you're using a Mac computer, okay? Or use the right control key to detach from this mouse hotkey. You can see that the Arch Linux is installing on this computer, on this virtual machine, with all the packages that I've selected. Basically, this Arch Linux setup has packages primarily for compiling the kernel and also writing kernel modules. Also some tools for navigating the kernel source like cscope. I also installed tmux and vim for convenience, and You'll also see certain other tools like Ccache and LLVM compiler tool chain and many other tools related to that getting installed, right? Which I'll be demonstrating in the course of this training as such. At this moment, I should also tell you, some people ask me, why am I using Arch Linux? I would have covered this in the earlier class, but just to summarize, you can choose any Linux distribution of your choice for kernel development. But why did I choose Arch Linux? It's just a personal bias, I would say rather. Many mainstream distributions like Red Hat Linux or Ubuntu or SUSE Linux and many others, these distributions are aimed towards application developers, systems engineers, or people who deploy Linux on server environments. But if you're going to be doing kernel development, many times you might want to download the latest kernel, which is officially available from kernel.org. If you just go to this website, kernel.org, this is where you can download the latest stable release of the kernel. Or sometimes if you're more adventurous, you can also sync up with the Git repository for the mainline kernel tree and also work on them. Now, the point is that this kernel that is being released here in kernel.org is the official kernel from the Linux Foundation, the team at Linux Foundation, headed by Linus Torvalds mainly. This particular version would give you the latest version at this moment. But if you look at all your mainstream distributions like, say, Red Hat Linux or Ubuntu, they will not bundle the latest stable kernel on their distros. They would take one of these long-term releases or slightly older versions of the kernel, maybe a 6.6 version or a 6.1 version or much earlier than that. And they would also have added some custom patches to them. So because I added custom patches to suit their requirement for their customers and their user base, trying to download the latest kernel from kernel.org and building there would be a bit of a challenge, because you need to apply those custom patches provided by the distro vendor. Otherwise, certain tools in user space might not work. So that's the reason, if you are a kernel hacker, you want to use a distribution that is that does not flavor the Linux kernel. In that sense, the distros that I would suggest, the popular distributions I would suggest is Arch Linux or their couple of other variants of Arch Linux, maybe Garuda or Manjaro or Endeavor OS. Though I don't really recommend those distros, other than using it for a desktop. For kernel developers, I think it's best to stick to Arch, or you can also look at another distribution called Slackware, which is one of my personal favorite distribution. But of course, Slackware does not have a very quick release cycle. The stable release happens maybe once in a decade, perhaps, or maybe 7-8 years. But having said that, they don't flavor the kernel. You can download the kernel from kernel.org and you can you can replace the kernel that's provided by Slackware, right? You can do that. Meanwhile, I think the installation is finished. It's now powering off. And once it's powered off, it's going to remove the CD-ROM and it's going to restart the VM one more time. You'll see this automatically rebooting. And now you have the virtual machine ready. So you should be able to see this grub menu where you can boot through the VM. And this time it's going to boot through Arch Linux. By the way, if you're using the Windows PowerShell, there's a small problem there. After the installation is completed, you might want to, once you see your VM booting, you should be able, you might want to remove the CD-ROM from the CD-ROM tray. You will see a CD-ROM icon here in the right-hand corner of this VM console. You might find the CD-ROM icon here, which is not there in this case because I removed it. But if you find a CD-ROM icon, you might want to right-click on it and eject it, and then reboot it once again. Otherwise, it boots from the CD-ROM all over again. Okay, so I was not able to figure out how to automate that part in the PowerShell. Maybe once I do that, I will update the script. For now, you have to do this manually. The way you find out whether you booted not from the CD-ROM once again, not from the ISO image, but from the install Linux is that you will see a login prompt. You can see an Arch Linux login prompt here, right? So you should be able to log in as user called root, and the password is welcome. All small letters, that is, and you should be able to see a root shell prompt. If you see the name as root at Arch ISO, you booted from the ISO image all over again. Just try to remove the CD-ROM in VirtualBox. There's a way to do that is right click on the CD-ROM icon that you'll find on the right corner and eject it. There'll be an option to eject it. Right now it's already being done by my script. That's why you don't see that icon in here, right? So just eject the CD-ROM, reboot the VM one more time, reboot the virtual machine by selecting maybe machine reset over here. And then you should be able to boot from the hard drive. Once you boot from the hard drive, you will see a grub menu prompt through which you can boot. One problem with this setup though is it does not have a graphical user interface. So you're stuck with this text mode command line. So you might be finding this a little crippled. So one way you can manage working on the command line is by using your host terminal. I've also set up an SSH tunnel here, which you can use readily. So what you can do is you can use your normal terminal that is there, your Windows terminal or your macOS or Linux terminal. And what you can do instead is once the VM is booted up and you see the root login prompt, you can connect to it remotely by using the SSH command. Just type SSH -p 2222. Okay, 42. That's the port. That's the SSH port that is being forwarded. And then type root at localhost. I've already done this earlier, so that's why I got this error. The SH key has changed. So if you get this error, just look at this line. Just want to take this line off. You want to remove that old stale keys must be removed. So I'll just remove that by running this command one more time. Done. And just run this command again. Let's clear the screen. We just want to type sh -p 2222 root at localhost. When you run this from your terminal, first time when you connect, it's trying to save this particular fingerprint of that node, that VM as a server. The fingerprint will be stored on your local machine. You can just type yes, the known host, and type in the password. The password for root is welcome. And now you're greeted with this shell prompt. That's root at Arch Linux. Now, some things I should tell you about what I've done here is there is a root shell profile that's also being added. That's happened during installation. Just to give you an understanding, if you look up the .bash rc in the root's home directory, you can see a couple of scripts here. Like I put a sh -s globstar, sh -s.glob, and source.shellrc. And the .shellrc script that is there here, this script does nothing but it navigates through multiple scripts in another folder called .shell folder. You'll find some similar pattern like this with .bash rc.d on Red Hat and SUSE based distributions these days. But I use the script from the early days, so I'm just following the same trend here. So with this, but what this script essentially does is it walks through all the scripts that are available in .shell/rc folder. All the scripts are sourced one after another. And some of these scripts provide some helper macros and aliases. You can have a look into it. You can customize it the way you want. It's running all in a VM, so you're safe. The kernel sources I'd like to keep in this particular folder, that's user local src. That's how I like to keep my kernel sources. All locally built programs are best kept under user local folder if you want to make it available globally, that is. Or you can also keep in your home directory, but I prefer to keep it here. And I've also created a build directory, which is where the kernel builds will go eventually. So in the further classes, I will tell you how to download the kernel from source code, how to build the kernel, and what are the configurations you can use. In the root's home directory, there are some config files, which I would be updating every now and then to reveal the latest kernel.config file and the busybox configuration file, which we'll be using for building both the Linux kernel and also busybox. So this will be the template configuration file that you can use so that it'll save you a lot of time if you're going to use VirtualBox environment for building Linux kernel as such, right? And this all that is there. And yes, let me just show you one more time. If you want to shut down this particular system, you can always do a systemctl power off. Because I've connected remotely, I get disconnected automatically and the VM would be powered off now. You can see that right here. The VM is powered off. Now, having said that, if I look at the virtual machines dashboard, which I will bring up here. Yeah. You will see a VM called Arch Linux VM created in VirtualBox dashboard. You can always start this VM by double clicking on this particular link too. if you want. And you can close the side dashboards. You can see there's a grub prompt that comes up. There's a grub menu that comes up. Grub is a bootloader for bootstrapping the Linux system, right? It's a very popular bootloader available on most Linuxes that primarily run on servers and desktops, right? So you can see Arch Linux as one of the menu entries. You should be able to just press enter here and this will bootstrap your VM. And as I mentioned, if you click your mouse inside this window, your mouse cursor would vanish. You do get a dialog box right here about mouse integration features and so on. But you can see that the mouse cursor is vanished. You don't see that mouse cursor anymore. If that happens, try using the command key on a Mac or press the right control key on Windows or Linux environment to get back the mouse cursor. So your mouse detaches and is now free to move. The same happens for the keyboard also. If you type inside this console, like you write in here, you'll not be able to focus your keyboard outside this particular console window. In order to detach the keyboard or mouse from this particular console, just press the command key or the control key on your computer. And then you should be able to use Alt Tab and switch between your apps as such. And yes, that's all there is to it. If you have any queries or any questions, feel free to ask them in comments, or you can also connect to me on the training dashboard. So I will see you in the next video. Thank you very much.